I really love this book. I do. I thank God that He would allow me to understand it. I thank Him for it because in this book are just, best way to put it, treasures that are beyond compare. Can't put a price tag on them, but there's something about them where they're so valuable and so personal that they change you. They actually change who you are, and they form who you're going to become. This book's amazing. Today we're going to study a verse that has really, it's literally changed me. To a large degree, it's defined who I am. I remember the first time I read it, it's really only about 3 verses, but these 3 verses stopped me dead in my tracks. It was almost like Jesus pulled me aside and He wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with me for the rest of my life, and it was something I had to decide. And it were these 3 verses that made, a major impact on my life. Often I go back to it to set my compass to true north again and again and again. It sets me back on course. And even as I studied this week, it brought back a lot of memories, and you'll hear some of those. But if you can, turn to John 6. John chapter 6. We're going to look at verses 66 to 71. The title is very simple. Stay or go. That's it. Should I stay or should I go? Let's read it starting in verse 66. Simon Peter answered Jesus. Verse 66. From this time, many of His disciples turned back, and they no longer followed Him. You do not want to leave too, Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered Him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We believe and we know that You are the Holy One of God. Then Jesus replied, Have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. He meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, who, though was one of the 12, was later to betray Him. That's it. Those are the only verses we're going to look at. It's small, but those simple verses, I'm telling you, if you digest them, they can change who you are and where you're going. They did to me. Here's the context, just to give you an idea. We'll go quickly. We just read about the 5,000 were fed. The large crowd continued to follow Jesus because they wanted more bread. Then He started teaching some tough stuff. Sounded a little bit like cannibalism, actually. We talked about that last week. Verse 66 says, many left. And then it has this idea that only the 12 are left behind. And then as He turns to them, He looks at them and He says, You don't want to leave too. And so they must have thought to themselves before they gave an answer in their heart, should I stay? Should I stay with this guy? Or should I go? To stay, it meant to continue following Him. It meant learning from Him, even through the hazy confusion of strange teachings. I'm going to cling to this man. Or should I go? Going means to give up on Him because in your heart, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Each of you must answer this question personally. If you do not answer this question for yourself, 3 things won't be true of you. Number 1, you're never going to be sure of your position with God. You'll always be wondering, doubting, questioning. Second thing is that you will not be convincing as you profess God. You won't be able to persuade anybody. And then the third thing is you ultimately will not be joyful in your possession of God because actually, if Jesus isn't your everything, He becomes a heavy burden. He becomes a divider. He really hasn't come to bring you peace. He's come to save you. So, honestly, will you stay with Him or will you go? Because I'm telling you, from my perspective, and the example we're going to find here, Every large assembly of people like ours, which we call a congregation, every congregation, any given congregation is comprised of different groups with different convictions and different degrees of dedication. Even if it's a mega church with a great pastor, big budgets, cool show up stage, to the small country church with the down-home storytelling preacher where you have only an organ playing, and even to a church like ours, that's what I'd say medium-sized, grace-come-as-you-are church, any congregational form is going to find three different groups, levels of devotion that are different. And what I'm going to ask you to do is kind of figure out where you're at. Which group are you? You're going to find there's a majority group. I'm going to call the majority group the wide roaders. In this story, 5,000 people are fed, but they left when Jesus quit making bread. They were by far the biggest group, and in the present-day congregation, they are the biggest group. They bring the energy, they bring the excitement, they bring the buzz, but they are always quick to be the first ones to leave when things in a church turn south. Are you part of the minority group? I'm going to call these the narrow pathfinders. In the story, it says 12 were left. The committed disciples are the only ones who remained. That's it. That's it. That's tragic. They probably felt the same emotions as the majority group. They probably loved the excitement and enthusiasm. They probably felt the same letdown, too, when Jesus taught strange things. What are you talking about, Jesus? But something about the minority group is different than the majority group. They have sticking power. I personally call this bone-deep conviction to stay. They know. Then there's a third group. It's by this, I got it from this guy named Judas. He's an interesting guy. He appears from outward appearances to be a pathfinder, one of the narrow group. But truly he's a double agent. He's part of a sleeper cell that's infiltrated the disciples. So which one are you? So we're going to find out. And I want you to evaluate as we go through. Which one are you? For the first group, the majority, the wide road. Jesus, I have to tell you, is very captivating. He's a captivating guy. There's no one like him. No one ever been like him. And so he attracts a crowd. He'll attract a huge crowd. He did it 2,000 years ago, and he still does today. But the problem is, in America, Americans are suckers for a big crowd. Bigness has this assumption in our mind, the bigger the crowd, the more important and genuine a movement must be. There's a big crowd, something true must be happening. That's how we view popularity. That's how we view success in America. The bigger, the better. But that's not always true. Because much of the time, a vast majority of the crowd is only along for the ride. Offer them a good time and people are quick to jump on board. But you have to never forget something. Here's the key. If you ever want to learn about ministry, it's this. What people come for needs to keep happening to get them to stay. What people come for needs to keep occurring to get them to stay. People who come for happening music will gripe when that happening has lost its hap. They'll be done. When people come for healing, you'll rarely see them at funerals or hospitals. People who love potlucks will go to the Golden Corral when all you have for the day is a communion wafer. 2,000 years ago, when the bread ran out, many ran off. Once you stop offering what people originally came for, they will stop coming altogether. It's just the facts. Listen how John puts it in verse 66. They just got done eating the food, and then Jesus gives this long theological diatribe. And then it says, from this time, many of his disciples, it's interesting, it says disciples, you'd think the 5,000, but also there were guys called the 70 who went out 2 by 2, other disciples. They all turned back, and they no longer followed. Why did they quit? Why do people quit? I'm going to offer some answers, and as I offer these answers, I wonder, are you considering some of these reasons to stop following? First one is confusion. I think people quit following Jesus because of confusion. In this section, Christ just taught some things like this. You need to eat my body and drink my blood. Ooh, what is he talking about? And then he says, only the people the Father draws will be raised on the last day. Boy, that's kind of strange too. You know, he still wants us to believe those things. And for some of us, when you start contemplating some of his teachings, it just doesn't jibe with me. It's kind of confusing. I don't like it. So people leave. I'll tell you what people really love to leave on is verse 65. The arrogant mind hates verse 65. Look at verse 65. Jesus says this, how he ended his message. And this is what I think really got him mad. This is why he told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him. Do you see what he's saying? The only people that get saved are the ones he chooses. Ooh, that makes people mad. You mean to tell me, if God chooses who will be saved, then I don't have any choice in the matter? Is that what you're saying? I'm a robot? Who gave God the right to decide the future of millions? Well, God did. He's God. He's got that right, doesn't he? But, prideful humans like to dictate their own terms when it comes to following Christ. We want salvation to be our decision at our time, in our way, when we're good and ready. I think that's what really ticks people off, is they can't choose Jesus later when they want to. Consumers, I think that's another group that leaves. People in the story wanted bread. He gave bread and fed them, and they were satisfied. People like a momentary taste, a full belly. Ah, that tastes good. But Jesus wants us to have more than just bread. He wants us to have eternity, the bread of life, Zoe life, which we talked about last week. Some people don't like that because faith, this idea of faith, is too abstract. I want things now. I want God to meet me right now on my terms. When I'm hungry, feed me. When I need a new house, send me more money. When I want a new outfit, don't get mad if I charge it, God. I want it. And then once I'm happy and my needs are met, really, you know what we say to God? Thanks a lot. You can leave me alone now. Isn't Sunday enough? Isn't Sunday enough for you? Then you have a third thing. I think this is, really it's the twin brother to consumers. It's comfort. It's a human tendency to want an easy path. This is one of the things all through John you'll start seeing people did not like. He talks about dying. Unless the seed falls in the ground and dies, it will not give any flower or fruit or life. We hate hard things. We hate sacrifice. Why do we have to deny ourselves and pick up our cross anyway? Can't I follow Jesus from the couch? It's really comfortable. And the fourth thing I think is people, they like conformity. And Jesus does not like conformity, believe it or not. Jesus likes to upset the status quo. The Jewish leaders always got upset with him. The crowd wanted just things to go as they were. They understood their culture and how they were raised. They don't like things being changed. Tradition, right? Taviate, tradition. Keep it the same. Jesus wants your heart. He could care less about your rules or customs. He wants your heart. So sometimes he'll upset the cart. That's too much of a hassle. Just give me peace. All of these reasons keep people from following. But remember something. Broad is the way that leads to death. All right, let's talk about the narrow pathfinders. There's another group in here. Call them the minority. As Jesus talked about his death, about the Father's calling, it says people grumbled, and then the crowd started thinning. We want bread, not this lofty theology. People get bored with lofty theology, by the way. There's no excitement with deep thinking. Just give us a show. Give me a sermon that makes me cry. That's what really people want. So people leave when the show leaves. And as Jesus watched them walk away, he turned and he saw the 12. It says the 12. That's what verse 67 says. There was just the 12. And instead of praising them, why doesn't Jesus say, hey, thanks guys for hanging around me? Jesus challenges them even further to lay everything on the line, and he asks them, do you want to leave too? Don't you want to leave too? I have asked this so many times, I can't even tell you. I asked this question when my friends wanted me to go to the party in downtown Cleveland instead of joining a Saturday night Bible study. I asked this to myself when I was walking downtown Chicago, the driving snow as I was heading to seminary class, no money in my pockets, living off of ramen noodles. I asked this when I was in Russia, teaching the gospel in public schools that were guarded by men with machine guns. I remember eating their food, and it was terrible. I remember living in an apartment in Russia with a young pregnant wife, oceans away from a trustworthy doctor and a supportive family. Why not quit and go home? I remember, or I often sometimes ask this in a job where I watch people die, or I counsel people in a bad marriage working on Sundays and summers while a large portion of the people just go to their cabin, go to their boat, go hunting in the woods. I ask this when I see other pastors who were once my colleagues who quit the ministry for more money. Chris, don't you want to leave too? And the answer Peter offers has become an anchor for my soul. He gives two answers. And these answers are unlike any other answers I found in the Bible, and they resonate with me. Peter, why don't you leave? Number one, listen to what he says. Lord, to whom shall we go? Man, is that an incredible question. That's really his answer. Here's what he's saying. He's saying, Jesus, look around. Compared to you, Jesus, I see no other viable alternatives. None. None. The Jewish scribes and Pharisees at that time were corrupt. Herod was a glutton and a hedonist. And Rome was just power hungry, and all they wanted to do is dominate. And here's Christ. He just gives his life. Who else compares? And it's still true. If you decided to quit following Jesus, honestly, if you decided to say, I'm done, I don't want any more of this, who's out there to follow? Honestly, who's out there to follow? Your buddies at the bar? Once you stop buying their drinks and laughing at their rotten jokes, they'll drop you like a cold. Boom, I'm done with you. Oh, you're going to keep just following your self-obsession of sports athletes and celebrities? They don't even know who you are. Do you think Justin Bieber let you drive his car? What, are you kidding? I know you don't follow Justin Bieber, but you do follow those sports teams. And LeBron could carry, he broke my heart in Cleveland, man. Nah, enough of that. Hope he loses today. Jared, what is that German word for that? Schadenfreude. It means delighting in the despair of others or something like that. And in politicians, you follow politicians? Good luck with that. There are some other choices, though, people will say. Here's some other choices. Here's some other alternatives. What about the atheists? There's a lot of smart ones out there. What about them? These are people who believe there's no God, and they're positive that you are a fool for believing in God. There's a positiveness. Actually, even though it's logically impossible to prove a negative, is what they're trying to do, they think you're a fool. We're going to talk more about them in a second, but as I was talking to Jared, have you ever seen Timothy Hawkins, that comedian? And he's asking a question. He said, have you ever been to Christian camp? You know where they have Christian camp songs? What if you're at atheist camp? What would they sing at atheist camp? Well, they have good atheist camp songs, and here's one of them. It goes like this. Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why. Sing along. Reason why we exist, but there's no reason why. Isn't that a great song? And then he said, how about the Jesus loves me? Here's how atheists would change it. Evolution, this I know, for Charles Darwin tells me so. Accidentally alive, if you're weak, you won't survive. Isn't that nice? That's a nice song. I just to give you a little perspective, there's nothing to sing when you're an atheist. What about an agnostic? People say agnostics are a little bit more honest because they say, I don't know anything. So you want to follow somebody who doesn't know anything because it's cool. I don't know what I know, but I'd like you to follow me. Why? Because I don't know. It's ridiculous. And then you have these group of people that are, anything's okay. It's called the open group. Just believe anything. But really, they don't care that nobody knows. They don't care. They just don't care. They act like they care only to be liked, but if somebody really cared about the truth, they'd argue for it. Oh, you're coming back to your next life as a dog? Well, that's great. Like, come on, seriously? You really believe that? But we're supposed to be nice, right? So who's there to follow out of this group? I want to go off-road for a second. And again, I want to promote my blog. But if you read my blog this week, I did something that actually, John, you like this. It's Pascal's Wager. It's Pascal's Wager. Have you ever heard of Pascal's Wager? Blaise Pascal was a philosopher back in the 1600s. He lived really about 1630 to about 60. And he was brilliant. He was a mathematician. He was a French philosopher, but he was a devoted Christian. He actually invented the calculator in Pascal computer language. He's a Christian. He also believed that it was a better bet to be a believer in Jesus than to be an atheist. And he wanted to convince atheists of this truth. So he said, really, your life is like a bet. You're making a wager every day with your life. And he said, when you make a wager, it looks like this. If you go to Vegas or anywhere, go ahead and click it. Your objective is to have a big expected value. You want to gain a lot out of your bet, and you want to not have a lot of loss. So you have three objectives. You want to minimize your losses. Hopefully what you're choosing doesn't have a lot of losses to it. You want to maximize your gain, and then you place your money after you figure it out, what is the best bet? So when he says, when it comes to your life, there's 5 rules in playing this game. Number 1, go ahead to the 5 rules of the wager. The first one is you must place a bet. You cannot opt out. You are human. You're placing a bet on what is the best life and what is the best future. So you're betting right now. So rule number 2 is this. Your daily behavior is how you're betting. That shows you what you're betting. If you use the Lord's name in vain, sleep around, and are a jerk and cruel and wicked, you are betting that there is no God. That's your bet, that he doesn't see you, that you're getting away with it. But if you live a life that is being pleasing to God, you're betting there is a God, and he's going to reward you. So how you live today is a bet. There's people that think, I don't have to make a bet. You're making a bet even by saying I'm not making a bet. Just, Pascal's saying, just be honest. Think about it. Third rule is this, is assume there's equal probability that there is a God and there's not a God. A lot of us will say, I know there's a God, but to an atheist, they're like, your evidence stinks. And I'll tell you what, when you argue with an atheist, they've been thinking. Most Christians don't think about their evidences and reasons, so be careful. So let's just make it a draw. Okay, there's 50% chance there is, 50% there's not. So let's assume equal probability. So in a sense, scratch out probability. Then you got to determine the real costs. What are some of the real costs? For a Christian, we have to endure a lot of self-denial to our passions and wants. There are a lot of things that we have to say no to. 10 Commandments say do not steal. Do not lust after women. It's a lot of self-denial, loss of immediate pleasure as a Christian. We must embrace suffering as a good thing, that God's working that suffering out to good. James says, consider suffering joy. Ooh, that's hard. That's hard to do. Believe it or not, we are often thought of as an uncool, out of touch. We are excluded from a lot of social gatherings. People won't invite us to the keg party. They just won't. That hurts. And truthfully, people don't listen to our opinions much in cultural debate. So those are some of the costs for Christians. And I'm just talking about immediate costs, what you pay into it right now. What are the costs for atheists? There's real costs. Here's some costs. They go through life with suffering too. Did you know atheists suffer? Everybody's a human suffers. They have cancer too, but they have no hope. They have a life really without meaning. If they're going to be honest about the costs, why do you exist? They don't have an answer. And truthfully, they live for self because they can live in the immediate, but often the person who lives for self is not trusted too often. Do you want to trust somebody with your money who just is out for himself? There's some costs. So then you calculate the gain. All right, what do I get back if I invest, if I make this payment? Well, for the atheist, it's short term. Everything's only short term because you have short and long term, but for the atheist, it's only short term, and it's really short. It's kind of like once you eat bread, next day you're still hungry. Everything's immediate for them. But it's a gain. They have guilt-free pleasure. They can do whatever they want without guilt. That's kind of nice. They have no restraints. They have complete control over their life, what they want to do, and they are not under the rule of a tyrant God and cold, narrow Christians. They love that. That's a benefit for them. But when they go unrestrained, I'm not going to talk about the costs of addictions and other things like that. Let's just put that to the side, even though they are real. All right, but they have a zero long-term gain. It's zero, and you'll see in a second. What is the Christian's gain? Well, if you become a real Christian, you become a trustworthy person of character. You just do. They have a community that loves them. They have hope in crisis. They have meaningful answers for their existence. The list can go on, but they have a great long-term deal. It's called heaven. It's really a good deal. Heaven's a goodbye. The atheist will scoff and say that's too good to be true, but heaven's really good, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, after you figure out your costs and after you figure out your benefits, you roll the dice, and then you always get a winner. Let's say the atheist wins and the Christian's wrong. What happens if the Christian's wrong? Go ahead and hit it. No measurable sorrow. The reason why is because when you die, you don't remember a thing. You are decaying into dirt. You have no emotions. You are a non-being, and non-being has no mind. You become the stuff a rock thinks about, Ravi would say. What is the stuff a rock thinks about? Nothing. That's what happens to you. But there's no sorrow because you don't have any feeling. All right, so that's your loss. What do you gain if you're right? It's called profound satisfaction. If you are right, you gain the whole world. You gained the whole world. That's a good deal. Is that a good deal? I don't know if that's a good deal to you, but if I go to Vegas and they say you'll own the world if you make this bet, what's that mean? Well, you'll see your loved ones again. You'll walk in a land that's perfect. You'll never go hungry and be thirsty. You won't have sorrow. You'll never cry again. And you will get a brand new perfect body. I'll take it. All right. But a lot of people think that's a joke. So let's say you're an atheist and if you're wrong. What happens if you're wrong and you're an atheist? Profound regret. Profound. For not only will you be able to consciously realize you're wrong, you'll still be conscious. But there's a little note in the Bible that talks about this four-letter word called hell. It's bad. It's bad. Constant pain, where you will cry, gnash teeth, be in utter torment. and you will be completely alone. That's called regret for all eternity. What if you win and you're an atheist? To me, this is just as bad. What if you win and you're an atheist? Think about this a second. Here's what you get. There's really no measurable joy because when you die, you don't remember a thing. You are decaying in the dirt. You have no emotions. You're a non-being. A non-being has no mind. You become the stuff a rock thinks about. You're nothing. And the worst part, even though you win, you can't tell anybody about it. That's the worst part. You can't say, I told you so. Have you ever seen Lord? Again, I love to go to Lord of the Rings, but Gollum has been chasing this ring, his heart's desire, his whole life. He finally gets it. And as he's looking at it, he's falling into lava. He finally gets what he wants his whole life, and he dies instantly. That's a nice prize, atheist, isn't it? So, who am I going to place my bet? Okay, if I place my bet on Christianity, here's my estimated value. Go ahead and hit it. I will have a no dissatisfaction guarantee. None. All right, if I place my money in atheism, I will have a no satisfaction guarantee. Guaranteed. I will never be satisfied. Why do you think most atheists are so angry? Did you ever really meet a real atheist? They're angry. They are driven out of anger, not out of joy. It's just the truth. So those are the logical alternatives to turning away from Christ. But Peter has another reason why he's following Jesus. It's not just there's no alternatives, but look at verse 68. He says, Lord, he calls him Lord. Whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. He calls him Lord. He knows that Jesus is not just one of many options. He's the Lord. He's God. He has firsthand knowledge of some things about Jesus. The first thing is he knows his words are like no other words. You alone have the words of eternal life. His words are powerful. They give life. They can raise the dead. They have authority. They're loaded with grace. Those words change you. They really change you. Just like this word right here changed me, made me a different person. His words change you. Have you ever been changed by his words? Peter has. Peter said in his first book that he followed Jesus for 3.5 years and never once was deceit found in his mouth. Never once. Ever. The second thing he says is by experience, he knows that he's God. Look at verse 69. We believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. You're the one that's been sent we've been waiting for. We know that. The way Peter phrases this idea is that belief gives way to knowledge. We believe, and in the Greek it says, we believe and now know that he's God. Peter believed Jesus in the depth of his soul, that he's God, that he's really God. One writer said, all human beings are looking for the core of truth. That's why we always use the word really, and, we want people to know, we really know, because we really want to know. And Jesus is really God. He's really true. He's the source of all truth. What Augustine would say is the only way you can know this is by first believing. He would say, to truly know, you must truly believe, and until you truly believe, you'll never truly know. I'll say that again. To truly know, you must truly believe, and to truly believe, and until you truly believe, you will never truly know. That's what I mean about the atheist. You just can't prove it to him. But when you believe, you know. That's what Peter's saying. So that begs the question, and it's this. Can someone believe without really knowing? Can you believe and not know? Well, there's one more group. Look at verse 70. And Jesus replied, have I not chosen you the 12? Yet one of you is the devil. He's talking to Judas. Judas looks like he's one of the 12, but he's really not. He's an adversary. He's the devil. I'd call him a double agent who's in a sleeper cell because he looks like he's part of them. What's interesting is James says, did you know the demons believe and they tremble? The idea is the demons believe in God. They believe, but they really don't know him because they hate him. They don't want him. That's how it is with people in the sleeper cell. A lot of them are very intelligent. A lot of them will know more doctrine than you. But there's a disdain for God and his people, and it really comes out in how they talk about the people of God. Because a true believer loves the Lord, his God, with all his heart, soul, and mind, and he loves his neighbor as himself. When you see somebody from the sleeper cell, they'll often acknowledge God, but they will hate his church. They will cut people down to size all the time. How they do this is they first infiltrate. Galatians 2:4 talks about these people that came to spy on the joy of others. They love to control other people. And then after that, they deceive. I'm going to show you something interesting. Go to 1 Timothy 4. This isn't stuff we talk about too much in the church, but it's real. 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. The Spirit clearly says that in later times, and I believe we're in those later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. So people abandon the faith and then they will join in bad theology. And such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. So people come into the group, and some leave and become teachers, but some leave and become caught into the bad teacher's teaching through deception. Their objective is to deceive. And then ultimately they want to destroy 1 Corinthians 11. Actually, 2 Corinthians 11, Paul says, I'm grieving because you left the simplicity of the gospel and you believe in another Jesus that will kill their lives and destroy them. Some of you are like, so you mean to tell me there may be some people in this church or in this group who have come to destroy it? Remember, I asked the question, there may be some people who have come to destroy it. My answer would be, you better believe it. Yes. One of the reasons a pastor is needed in a church is to confront the wolves. And over my years here at this church, you wouldn't believe some of the wolves. You just wouldn't believe it. Some people that were high leaders in here. Often, sadly, many of the people that are in the sleeper cell group seem to be the most godly. So, if we go back to John 6, Jesus is asking you, do you want to leave? Jared and Callie, if you come on up, they're going to finish with a song. And as they do, I want you to think about these groups and yourself. Do you get upset? Ask yourself this. Do you get upset when things aren't comfortable, you don't like the teaching, things don't go your way? Do you get upset and want to go? Maybe you are part of the group that, man, I just don't understand, but I know I need to keep going. I need to keep hanging on. Or are you one that really doesn't like people, criticizes and complains and gossips about people in order to destroy them?